Hey, and welcome to this awesome session about how can you elevate your leadership in the era of AI. I'm Andreas Welsch, your host for today's session, and I'm joined by Dr. 𝗟𝗲𝗱𝗲 and Brian Evergreen, who've also just recently released their first courses on LinkedIn Learning. And super excited about the conversation we'll have about how leadership is evolving and what can we do as leaders in this space as we look at individual topics. If you're interested to dive into AI and agentic AI that's been on people's mind for, I would say, the second half of this year, please check out my courses on the challenges and opportunities and how you can prepare. But without further ado, I'll hand it over to Lisa for a brief introduction, who you are and what you do and what the courses are.
Thanks, Andreas. It's so great to be here. My course is Board Leadership in the Age of AI, and it's really about, I tell people that winners and losers are being made in the market right now today, and boards are at the forefront of that. So you need to make sure that you're balancing risk and opportunity. And I go into very specific applied AI examples. I'm all about talking about examples. I actually included 17 case studies that are sprinkled throughout that talk about what works well and what doesn't within the enterprise space specifically. So excited. I've had a lot of people watching it, and hopefully they're really getting a lot of value out of it.
Wonderful. And I mean, all three of us have been connected on LinkedIn for quite some time. But then working with boards is something that you do on a regular basis and advising them. Maybe feel free to share a bit more about that too.
Yes, I've been in boardrooms all over the country. Also have done some virtual boardroom meetings for those in other countries. And top of mind for everyone is risk profile management and what are areas where they could actually be using artificial intelligence to drive revenue streams. And those two things are super top of mind. So it's both ends of the spectrum, from making sure that we're covering ourselves from an exposure perspective all the way to how do we disrupt our own industry. That's a common question I hear in the boardrooms is around disrupting. They want to be thinking about who's coming after us and who should we be going after with the way we're thinking of disruption.
Wonderful. Now, folks, for those of you in the audience, if you have a question for Lisa or Brian or myself, please feel free to put it in the chat. Where, we want to make sure that this is time well spent also for you, and we can have a dialogue here. So super excited to learn more about your perspective there too. So maybe handing it over to you, Brian. What's the topic that you're passionate about and that your course revolves around?
So my course revolves around organizational leadership in the era of AI. That's the name of the course as well. And it really comes from my experiences at Microsoft and beyond of trying to implement AI and to develop AI strategies from back when I was in the technical sphere all the way up through C-suite, working with multiple Fortune 500 C-suite teams when I led AI strategy for Microsoft US. And what I found at the time was that the system of leadership that we were using, the best practices that we'd been taught, and then the management system that we'd inherited from the Industrial Revolution was not built for purpose. It was not working. It was like James Clear says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And we were finding that on the front lines, working with some of the best data scientists in the world, some of the top domain experts, some of the biggest brands with C-level sponsorship. We were falling to the level of our systems, and we realized, it's not that there's not enough smart people working on this. It's not that there's not enough funding. The system of leadership and management and strategy is failing us. So I set about to create a new system and introduce that in my book that came out last year, and then dove deeper into developing that into a course that, sort of an initial taster course, only 48 minutes that we launched together last month with LinkedIn Learning.
That's awesome, right? All of our courses have also launched recently, so please do check them out. They're super fresh and super current. And when LinkedIn reached out to me to brainstorm what could be good ideas to pursue, we said, well, actually this topic of agents, if we make it tangible, that's in the news all the time these last few months. But what does it actually mean? And that aligns really well with my passion of helping businesses and leaders figure out where can we actually use AI and how can we prepare for that. And I mean, a lot of times we talk about technology, we get excited about the hype and what can we do, and we can drive more automation and in greater levels of autonomy. But when you actually break that down to what does it mean for me in my business, not only on the technical side, I think that's one component, but the other one that we see is always around change management and bringing people along. Where are the challenges, where are the opportunities? How can I prepare as a leader that is asked to, in very practical and tangible terms, move this along, look for opportunities, whether it's in customer service or HR or other business functions. So to give you some ideas, where can you start? And also, how does the working paradigm change if all of a sudden we work more with AI as a thought partner, as an assistant to do that? But Lisa, I'm sure you must be seeing some of those conversations at the board level too. Where do you see them happening, and what's top of mind for boards in that area?
There's so much opportunity to leverage AI from an efficiency perspective. So it's very attractive for people to think about what can we do with artificial intelligence to drive efficiency / profitability. In that vein, it also gets very quickly on what does that mean for our workforce? What does that mean when we're thinking about forward-looking job role changes? There is so much angst in the market, largely churned by the media, about what's happening with job replacement, that boards are very concerned about brand management. How are they going to make sure that the actions that they take around artificial intelligence are going to be positively perceived by the customers that they serve? So they're very aware of the potential for backlash if AI is used in a way that is heavily automating or releasing, that leads to a lot of downsizing of personnel. They need to think about this, right? We all realize that as their primary job is to manage return for stakeholders. That's what they're responsible for. And so they have to take those things into consideration, but they are also very much interested in balancing the financial elements of it with the potential downside or impact to their brand from a public perception perspective.
No, that's very good to hear, right? It's on one hand about shareholder value and value creation, but certainly also being aware and keeping probably more than just one eye out on what is happening, what does it mean for our business, where are the opportunities, where are the threats. Now, when you break this down, and from a board level to a senior leadership level, mid-level leadership level, I see that causes a lot of concern and stress on people, right? On one hand, we want to be more productive, effective, profitable. But on the other hand, that means change. In a lot of times, especially in larger organizations, people are pretty comfortable with the way things are working and how they've worked for the last 10 or 20 years. Brian, how do you see the role of leadership here, and leaders needing to step up, in which practical ways can they guide this transformation?
Thanks for the question, Andreas. I think that's a great way to frame that. I would say that also in response to what Dr. Palmer said, I completely agree with you that that's exactly the pressure that leaders are facing today. Is boards are looking to them for, hey, we need you to, leverage the opportunity that this technology presents, and we want it to be profitable, and we want you to move quickly in a lot of cases. And what's interesting is if you pause and look back at history and you think about even just in recent history, what are the companies that have most effectively reinvented themselves in the era of AI? And what's interesting is the pressure that's coming from shareholders and from stakeholders, depending on which level you're at, is often, as much profitability as fast as you can with as low of risk as possible. And what's interesting is if you zoom back to 2014, when Satya Nadella stepped into leadership as the CEO of Microsoft, if his mindset was, okay, as much profitability, never sacrifice that, as efficiently as possible, and and with the lowest possible risk, do we think that Microsoft would have had the transformation that they've had over the last decade, which ultimately turned into 10x the market value that they had in the last decade from where they were in 2014. And so I think for leaders in general, when we look at it, it's easy to want to take the quick win, the low hanging fruit. Let's just get started. Let's just find a good use case. And that you can post good numbers, maybe quarter after quarter. But the accrual, if you add all those things up, what they accrue to is not anything that's a meaningful transformation. So instead, taking a step back and taking a longer view and saying, what is the vision for the future of the market of the value that we create? It doesn't have to be at the whole market, depending on which altitude you're at. It might just be, what's the future of the value that we want to create as a team within our organization, even if we're an internal only facing team. What's the best possible value that we could create? And what would have to be true for us to create that value? And that may or may not be profitable in the short term, but it might be exceedingly profitable in the long term. And so that's where, then having those conversations that are vision led as opposed to numbers led, because numbers can be interpreted any which way, depending on how we want to interpret them. And so it's easy for us, I think, to get off track very quickly when we're just focusing on trying to optimize for numbers instead of a vision, a bold and achievable vision for something we want to achieve. But Andreas, how about you? When you think about, there's this new moment, everyone's talking about AI agents, and that's the hot topic in the last few months. And you've released 2 courses on the topic. What's your take on how leaders should be thinking about AI agents and how quickly they should move, or how they should be, approaching this technology?
I'm super encouraged by the pace of innovation that we're seeing. Like last year, we saw the first AI agentic frameworks coming out. People were experimenting with these large language models and how can we use them to create or disseminate a task, first of all, and see how far we can push the boundaries. Not even 12 months later, we're at a point where large commercial vendors are embedding these capabilities in their products. Companies like Microsoft and others are putting out early agentic AI frameworks where your technology teams can get hands-on and experiment with them. And many startups have emerged in that space with very specialized, vertical-focused solutions there. But I think the big change that we are seeing and going to see, and by the way, that's why I encourage everyone to try as much getting hands-on with these tools as possible, is we're seeing a paradigm shift. Because so far, we've used software for a very specific task. We've been very specific in the instruction that we've given it, also how these systems have been programmed. Now with agents, we start giving it a goal. Can you create a marketing brief for a campaign focused on our new athletic footwear? It should target certain personas. So first of all, come up with the persona, then have a second agent help you do the copywriting and editing, maybe a third one with the creative side, and put it back together into a brief that I, as a marketer, can review and further adjust. So it's a lot more iterative. It's a lot more back and forth. And I'm extremely bullish and confident on this, that this will give all of us in any organization and all of our teams a group of experts at our disposal 24/7 that we previously have not had access to. Now, the challenge that I also see that this brings is how, as an employee, am I going to work with these tools to get the best output? And I think that's where Priya's comment comes in. I see a lot of organizations, large organizations now provide basic prompt engineering training to their employees, which I think is a fantastic start. So you can help them get more productive already. But I think then the next step is, when it comes to usefulness, trust, getting good output, that we still need a level of understanding and skill and awareness to assess, is this right? Is this true? Is this complete? Is this comprehensive? Before we pass this on. So as leaders, my last point here, the challenge is similar to today. When you have a team, you give them a task, you get the interim result back. As a leader, you need to assess, is this really good and useful? Is this something that we can put forward, or are there any additional things we need to consider?
Yeah, so many great points there, Andreas. I think that we have to help organizations to understand. I love what you said, paradigm shift. I actually use that phrase also. I have people ask me a really basic question, like, why is it that the experts will tell us they don't really know what the AI is going to do. Now, of course, they're talking specifically about generative AI, right? And that's very disconcerting to people that are trying to learn how to deal with the impacts of artificial intelligence and what does it mean. So taking people through that basic understanding that it's not deterministic programming, that when you use generative AI, that you are kind of unleashing the learning capabilities of this particular technology and all of the pros and cons that go with that. So that is, even if you've been a non-technologist for years, you understand what deterministic programming is. We sit down, we tell the computer what to do, and it does it over and over again until we tell it to do something different, right? Everybody understands that. But when you talk about what we're doing, what we're seeing with large language model capabilities, generative AI in general, what we're seeing with agentic AI, where we're actually, plugging together lots of these different learning tools, that angst goes up even more because people want to put it inside of that deterministic computer approach, right? They want to think about it the same way that it's always worked in the past. And so helping people to understand that this is a paradigm shift, the change management portion that you mentioned earlier, it's just so important to making people understand that it's a journey and it is going to look different than it did before.
I love that, Dr. Palmer, and I'd say that one thing I'd add to that is that a layer that similar topic, but another way that I've found helpful to talk about it as well is that software is technology that is learning by based off of, like you said, explicit programming, whereas AI is software that learns by example or by practice. And so learning by example is sort of traditional machine learning, and actually in a lot of cases, most accurately, generative AI is also learning by example, right? It's having examples of all the ways that we talk about things, and it's learning from those examples, it's creating connections, and then its output will mirror that. Whereas learning by practice is reinforcement learning, right? Where you might have a goal that you're setting for a given technology, and then the technology practices it over and over. We see that most easily visible in robotics, where they're trying over and over again to grasp and move something over somewhere else, learning each time it fails until it has mastered it. And I think that, when you think about it through that lens, and then the next step after that, once it's learned something by example or by practice, then it's still up to us. The technology doesn't just run away and do whatever it's going to do. It's up to us to have intelligent applications of this technology. And one way I didn't talk about it in my course, but I did write an article for VentureBeat introducing this idea that in every other scientific discipline, we have the research, and then we have engineering, like chemical research, and then chemical engineering makes safe and practical applications of whatever they find in the chemical research, right? And the same for physics and every other scientific discipline. But with AI, we sort of have this amorphous blob of, okay, there's researchers who are then trying to, they got into the field because they're so passionate about math, and they're trying to advance the applications and statistical or machine learning algorithmic methods. They're not necessarily that interested in increasing productivity by 2 to 3% or whatever it might be, or even 20%. And so having a new discipline where we're looking at it as, there is AI research, but then there's also engineered intelligence, where not every business is a digital business. That's something that has been said a lot over the last decade. I would say more accurately, every business is an intelligence business. If you boil it all down, the thing that makes you unique, your core competency, is really some form of intelligence. And so thinking about it through that lens, and thinking, to your point, Dr. Palmer, about how do we, with this shift in the paradigm of saying, how do we record and look at the different types of expertise and intelligence that we have? Can we leverage AI to harness, to either replicate or even build on that intelligence, and experiment safely in simulation in a digital version of whatever it is, the process or the machinery that we're working with, And it might come up with an even better way to do that narrow task. And then we as people, again, get to apply it. And so one thing I mentioned in the course is that not everyone is coming. People say AI is coming for your job, or someone else with AI is coming for your job. I love to say AI is coming to your job because it will transform the way that we work. But it's not that AI is going to knock on the door and apply for our job and then get accepted and then we're going to get fired, right? Like it's not how it's ever going to work. It's trendy and it's catchy, but it's not the reality. And we as leaders need to be very careful about how we talk about these things. So just wanted to riff off of some of what you shared, Dr. Palmer. Andreas, for you, from an AI agent perspective, I'd be curious some of the applications that you're seeing in the market that you're excited about.
So one of the first applications that I'm seeing is around customer service, right? We see a lot of common requests, maybe even the questions that we have as customers that we put out there to the companies we buy products or services from. I would estimate that about 80% of the questions you get as a vendor are probably going to be the same, right? Same type of things. If you're in an IT organization, probably 80% of the questions are, can I reset my password? I can't log in. Where do I find the software? In similar way, customer service here as well. Now, where AI agents can really help is understand what is the problem that this customer is actually asking about. If you take this down, maybe it's a product question. It's something, how do I use this product? Maybe I bought a portable generator and every time I want to start it, it doesn't work on the first try. Is there anything that I'm doing wrong? So one agent can, first of all, understand, hey, customer has a problem with a generator of this type of family. Either look in a knowledge base or look in a product documentation and then resurface what would be the right step here to take. And now, instead of having a customer service agent, a human do that manual work, they're now presented with the information of, hey, we think here's the problem, here's the common solution of how we've typically responded to these types of questions. Is that something you want to send off verbatim? Are there any edits you want to make? So really keeping that human element in the loop, but not having to spend as much time here. And we're seeing systems where it's not only one agent with a specific task, but a group of agents that are monitored or supervised by another one that critiques and says, well, maybe your response is too long or too verbose, right? Or your style is too professional or is too colloquial. So you need to change that, a subordinate agent, and then come back before we send this up. But to maybe also pick up on Priya's point about the enablement, I spent more than 20 years at SAP in different leadership roles. SAP, one of the largest business application vendors in the market. And one of the challenges we had as far back as 2017, 18 was, how can we quickly enable our teams, and especially engineers, software engineers, on what is machine learning, what is AI, how do you do that? And for us, that meant creating a community of practice. So bringing together product managers, product engineers, and architects, working through a curriculum that we designed, starting with the basics. What is AI in machine learning? Now you can add, what is agentic AI? How does it work? Create a foundational understanding. Bring in experts who've already done a few projects or worked with customers that saw what worked well, what didn't. Actually, our teams told us we want more time for this dialogue and for this exchange, which was interesting. And then go through a structured curriculum to, on one hand, share the knowledge, and on the other hand, gather some feedback. What is working well in your line of work if you're developing finance applications, or if you are in finance and you're using these things? Bring back what's working well, what's not working so well, and where you see some ideas. Because I think once you start sparking those ideas, that helps technical roles and transformation teams a lot more to see where are additional opportunities we haven't tapped into. And now the interesting thing is, as I'm working with large enterprise clients here around generative AI, agentic AI, we're following the same approach here as well. Early adopters, give them some foundational training. What is this technology about? What can you use it for? Lots of hands-on exercises to manifest that learning. And then as they go off, become multipliers, become advocates for you. So one of the things towards the end of the preparing your organization for AI agents in my course that I cover as well. So definitely lots of change that we need to get ready as leaders, and that means understanding the foundation, but also being able to encourage our teams to try that out.
I even, in my course, I even challenge board directors to get hands-on with generative AI tools. And I share a story that I had a cohort of 12 CEOs come to me. They were a group that gets together frequently to support one another and have, work together. And they came to me asking me to teach them the fundamentals of a myriad of different tools so that they could come at this from more of a place of understanding. And I was so excited about that, because as somebody who's a lifelong technologist, when's the last time that you had a group of executives actually come to you and want to be early adopters in their businesses, right? That was a first for me in my career, to have that many executives step forward and say, we want to be early adopters. So that hands-on learning, that hands-on enablement for themselves at the executive level, it opens up the aperture of the art of the possible. It really gets people thinking about ways that they could use it in their daily life, and they start to translate that into what does it mean for customer experience, what does it mean for the way that we're disrupting the market, or we could be disrupted in the market. There is nothing that helps people understand it more than to just spend some time with these tools and really personally experience the power that resides in the tools.
Yeah, and I think that makes it so powerful, right? Your senior executives, your board members, they can be hands-on with these tools too, because they can, for the most part, install them as an app on their phone and use them on a daily basis. So, if you're wondering, why are you getting questions? How do we figure out AI? What is our strategy? And what do we do? Because there's this large democratization happening, that anybody can have access to these tools, and people are eager to learn because they see that their peers are doing this, and not just the stories in the news and the fear of missing out type of things, but it's a lot easier to get hands-on.
Yeah, I absolutely love the democratization of access to the tools. I do think there's nothing that gets people more excited than a personal experience, right? We all translate it from a business lens, but when you see what it can do for you, I'll give you an example. My dad is on several medications, and he had started having this ringing in his ears. And I took a picture. He had a handwritten list of all of his medications. I took a picture of it, and I asked a large language model if any of these medications together could possibly be causing him to have ringing in the ears. It identified 2 medications that together are contraindicated for that. And we reached out to his physician. He said, yes, that very much could be what's happening. He changed his medicine, and now he doesn't have the ringing in his ears anymore. So I had no idea if that would work, but I thought, why not? Why not try it? It was a personal experience that very much impacted the quality of his life. And that's an exciting story to tell that gets people interested in what's possible.
Yeah, one thing I also, I think to balance this perspective of jumping in, because I think it is important. I completely agree with everything you both said about jumping in and getting familiar with kind of some of these paradigm shifts that are taking place. And then the balance to that I recommend is, because it's easy to jump in and think, oh, this is so quick and easy. Look at how well it just drafted an outline for me, or a memo for me, or it checked for spelling errors, which, more or less, don't try to have it correct strawberry or tell you how many R's are in there. But a balance to that is, it can be easy then to focus on, go so fast and so quickly into the direction of the tool that you can lose, the connection to a vision or a goal that you actually want to achieve, and the very, I would say, real and doable, but but it does take work of strategy. And a lot of times I think we talk about these things like, you know, sort of if you were going about a remodel of your home. This is something I shared in the courses. If you're going to remodel your home, and let's say, Dr. Palmer, we're going to remodel your home to build a fireside behind you so that, you know, you're ready for your fireside chat that you mentioned you have coming up. I show up and I have a hammer, and I see I already broke the analogy because we started with the fireside. So let's scrap we're not building a fireside. You have no idea what you want to do. You just know you want to remodel. And I show up to your house and I have a hammer and I have a saw. And I say, listen, this is the best hammer on the market. This is the best saw on the market. Let's get going. Let's walk through your house. Let's find places that we can make things better with this hammer and with this saw. Would you think that was a smart, or, I mean, we would think that was crazy, that no one would want to start a home remodel that way. But that's exactly what we do so often with AI is we say, you know, let's pick up the AI tool and let's look around our business for how we're going to make things better with this AI tool. And I think that's one slippery slope we can fall down when we get really excited about what it can do. And we have to take a deep breath, step away from the technology for a minute and think, all right, we're an insurance business, or we are a food aggregator, or we are whatever it is that we do. And where is the market headed? What consumer or customer or partner or ecosystemic, like what is the expectation? How is it evolving? How can we anticipate future needs or value that we could create that would be so much better than what we're already doing today? And then put that North Star, you know, somewhere on a board, and then say, what are the things that would have to be true for us to achieve that? And it may very well be that generative AI is one of the steps between here and there. But it may very well be that it's not. And that, you know, and that you might say, well, this North Star, for instance, I have this great story from a friend of mine at AWS that went to meet with a retail company or a company that manufactures retail goods. And they said, we're so excited to talk about all the ways we're going to transform with generative AI. Let's get going. And she was like, okay, this is great. This is great. What are some of the biggest things you're facing as an organization? And they said, well, one problem we have is that we are often out of, you know, it's a good problem to have, but we're often out of supply in the retail stores because people are buying them all off the shelves. And so then we're out of supply. So that's probably something we should figure out at some point. But let's talk about how we can improve our business with generative AI. And I know for both you, Andreas, and Dr. Palmer, that's, you know, a no-brainer for, maybe you should fix that first. That's one of the most core elements of your business, is having your product on shelves so that customers can buy them. And if they're going off the shelf faster, you're leaving a lot of demand on the table. And so, you know, fix that first. And it's probably not having, you know, good words generated or images generated is not going to get your product on the shelf faster. So let's fix your supply chain issues first and foremost. There may be other of the 26 other categories of AI. Some of those might apply to fixing that issue. But, you know, start with your North Star first. All that to say, I'm on a tangent, so I'll stop and ask one of you a question. But start with that North Star, because it's so easy when we pick up these tools to get so excited about them and do a bunch of really fun things and quick, easy wins, and totally lose track of the real value and our core competency that makes us unique as an organization. And so, Andreas, I've asked you the last two questions, and I'm going to go the other direction. So, Dr. Palmer, when you think about, you know, I've asked Andreas about AI agents. What's your take on AI agents, and you know, the sort of your vision or your you know, when you future cast on like where are we going to be in a few years? What do you think the world's going to look like when it comes to and what changes this new wave of technological revolution might have on our organizations and the future of work?
I see agentic AI very similarly to microservices. And, you know, when we went from Goliath, you know, boil the ocean systems, and then we moved into an architecture that was really more about microservices and enabling more flexibility, enabling different types of capabilities at different speeds, and focus based on always grounded in business value. So Brian, I love what you said about making sure that you take that deep breath and think about how are we actually creating value for our business. And from my course, I'm talking about it from a truly strategic, long range board of directors level conversation. But, you know, tactically speaking, with regard to agentic AI, I think it gives us a lot of that same power and flexibility that we all learned is valuable when we embrace microservices. Just a similar approach that I think, or a similar kind of mentality to help people consume what that might potentially look like. I'm a big fan myself.
I love that analogy, because I think there's a way that, depending on how we go about it, because it's still up to us as leaders and our you know, the organizations that are developing these tools, you know, we may end up creating another form. I often say it, the Internet of Agents, like another version of the internet that that would be based on, actually, microservices would be, I think, a big part of the sort of architectural framework that we might leverage. Andreas, what do you think about that?
I'm usually not a big fan of comparing AI and humans or human equivalents, but please follow along for a second. I think it translates relatively well. So we see early cases where we have one agent that does a specific task. We see the next cases are already emerging where multiple agents work together in a team. So much like in business, in any company, we have specialists that focus on individual tasks. They're really good copywriter. They're really good creating marketing briefs and strategy. They're really good at creating creative concepts. In business, we organize them in a team, or depending on the size of your business, even in larger organizations. So I can see this already happening with AI agents today, that we create virtual teams within organizations. So they can help you if you're in marketing, they can help you if you're in customer service, if you're in finance or in any other business function, take over tasks that you would otherwise need to do yourself or need to ask, you know, 5 other experts in your organization about. So going further, I envision that it's not only just the virtual marketing agents working with each other, but say they have a budget question, they can ask the next virtual team over there of finance AI experts, right? Is this within the guidelines? How can we get additional funding? How can we get this approved? What are the proposals we need to put forward? So interdepartmental within an organization. And then much like we do as well, right? Think of sellers and buyers between 2 different companies. Have these agents, again, at a company level, work with each other and work out what's the best the best deals we can get, any discounts, where can we source the material from, different customers, or sorry, different vendors, different locations, what's the optimal strategy? And that's, I think, layering into what you mentioned with the Internet of Agents, where I think over time we'll see much more of that happening. We're at the very early stages of this right now, which again is why I would encourage you to learn about this in the context of business and in the context of business functions. It hasn't been out there for a long time, right? It's maybe been out there as a more solidified concept for the last 12 months, 18 months, if you want to be provocative, but it's not like it's been out there for decades. So learning about these concepts now positions you extremely well for this future as virtual teams of agents grow in a particular domain, in different domains, and eventually between companies.
You know, one could even say that we're moving from an era of digital transformation to autonomous transformation. Do you agree?
Having read your book, yes, absolutely. Right? That's the title of it.
No, I love what you said, and I agree. I love that breakdown of agents, you know, inside of a team, across teams, and then across companies. That's a great way to think about it. And one example I gave, because my course isn't explicitly on agents, but there was one example I gave about the Internet of Agents where I talked about, if you imagine because today that there's a type of value, and that's in general, I'd say in general, we talk about AI. I think that there's this concern about loss of jobs. I think that organizations that are trying to use AI to cut costs are people who have run out of ideas or haven't put enough time into coming up with ideas of ways to create more value with AI instead of just cutting costs while delivering the same value to the market. I think that we need to think about it like a GDP, like increasing your organizational GDP through these types of tools and technologies, as opposed to same GDP, but fewer people. right? And so I think that's one thing I'd say. But then the other that I'd say, this example of the Internet of Agents, is that, that right now, when you have two different organizations in a market, let's say the one I gave in the course was lumber, where let's say, Andreas, you and I each own construction companies, and we're on opposite sides of the country, and we each need the same type of lumber. And I call ABC Lumber, and they say, oh, we only have, yes, we have that type of lumber, but it's over in Pennsylvania. And then you call, Lumber 123, and they say, we do have that lumber, but it's in Seattle. And then we're each drawing up purchase orders to then have lumber shipped across. And it's like an old, if anyone's heard I think, was it Mitch Hedberg or Brian Regan? There's a comedian who makes a joke about it, which is actually where I got the idea as an example. Like, you had logs, we thought you needed logs, but it turns out that we both need the same thing, even though we have those logs, that lumber near us. And in today's paradigm, it would be way too costly and time consuming for each lumber company to double check with all the other lumber companies whether or not they might have that nearby, and right, that's never going to happen. So they draw up a purchase order, they book a driver that's going to drive that lumber across the country, and then you and I are then each paying more money. There's more carbon emissions. There's time being taken of those drivers that are needing to do that extra cross country drive and be away from their families. And so in the autonomous transformation paradigm, in the Internet of Agents paradigm, when you say, hey, I need some lumber, the ABC Lumber can check with all the other lumber companies in a second, right? In milliseconds through their various agents representing each of them. And then Lumber 123 can say, yeah, we actually do have lumber in Pennsylvania right next to your customer, and they can actually trade customers for referral bonus. And so they're still both profiting off of it, but then you and I are actually saving money and there's less carbon emission, and there's it's a better impact for those truck drivers to not have to make those drives. So it's better for everyone. And I think there's a lot of value unlock and new types of value. To me, that's 80-90% of what we're going to see with AI, as opposed to same value, but just done a little bit more efficiently or better with AI. I'd be curious if that aligns to both of your perspectives and how you talk about it in your courses.
Maybe let me jump in real quick. Brian, can you post the links to our courses again? Because we've worked with LinkedIn to make them available for you for free for a certain period of time. I think it's up to 30 days if you start today. So please don't miss to check them out, learn about AI, agentic AI, what happens at the board level, and how you can prepare your organizational leadership in the era of AI. But Lisa, maybe question to you before we wrap up. What's your big takeaway when it comes to leadership in the era of AI?
Human plus AI. AI is not the solution by itself. This is about, I love Brian's talk track around autonomous transformation. I think we're going to move very quickly towards more autonomous decision making. And as we do that, the roles that humans have, particularly at the board level, when we talk about culture management, when we talk about directionality from a risk mitigation perspective, when we talk about how they want to reinvent, in many cases, the organizations that they are driving and leading, all of those things have to have thoughtful, purposeful understanding of the partnership of artificial intelligence with humans. And we want to make sure that we continue to look at things like bias in our systems, bias in the way that we design solutions, the way we design teams. We can have more or less positive and negative impacts based on us staying very focused on driving business value and on making sure that every solution that we create has human in the loop, has that kind of human plus AI element to it.
Wonderful, thank you. Brian, what's your perspective as we wrap up?
I mean, what I would say is that a couple of things. One is I love what you shared about bias and ethics. I think it's, I wrote an article for VentureBeat that I'll share in the comments called "Trust in AI is More Than a Moral Problem." And I created a new AI trust equation that I'll share out. But in terms of overall wrap up, I'd say that from my end is that I think that this is an important moment for leadership, and we have a dearth or a lack of vision right now in our organizations. There's a lot of looking around to figure out what someone else is doing and trying to figure out how can we do what we're doing a little bit more efficiently, and how can we do it with as low risk as possible. And I think that the organizations that are going to really move forward and retain or expand their market position in the next 5 to 10 years are those that have bold and achievable visions, and that take bold risks and moves in those directions. Because that beautiful future you want to be in, it does not exist without risk. Risk is the thing that stands between you and that future you want to go to. And we try to eliminate risk as much as possible. And we really make decisions in an unscientific way, which you can learn more about in my course. I won't go on further there. But that's one of the biggest takeaways for me, is that we need leaders to have bold and achievable visions and scientific strategies for how we would achieve those visions. But how about you, Andreas? How would you bring us home in terms of your takeaways from a leadership perspective?
Look, so no matter where you are in the organization, whether you operate at the board level, at a senior executive level, mid-level, or if you're an individual contributor, there's never been a better time to learn about AI, how to use it, what its impact and its implications are, and how we can use it effectively so we get results that are good, that are ethical, that are reliable. And as we're seeing more autonomy being introduced, what does it mean for our individual work? What can we do with that additional time? And what are the tasks that we can finally get to that we haven't been able to get to before because we're busy with busy work? So again, whether at the board level, the leadership and executive level, or trying to keep an eye out on how does work and autonomy evolve, please do check out our courses. Brian put the links in the chat. They're open for the next 7 days. And thank you so much for joining us today and for your questions. Also, Brian and Lisa, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your expertise.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thanks for having us. Thank you. Great discussion.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye-bye.